The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Chairman McCaul, have you requested any classified briefings on this topic?
Yes, we requested briefings from the administration. We made phone calls. We've had no response. The only response we got was on the day the president formally announced this decision. At about the same time it was being reported in the media. Very limited information given to my staff director.
Is this common or uncommon with this?
Very uncommon, yeah.
What do you attribute?
No, the only other time it happened was when, the special envoy to Iran, Mr. Mali, we requested him several times because he was the special envoy who was negotiating the Iran deal. And he wouldn't show up, and guess why? Because he was under investigation by the FBI for violations of his security clearance. That's the only other time.
Do you have any speculation as to what's going on here? What do you attribute this to?
I can't, you're asking me to speculate. All I know is that it's been silence. We've been trying to get information on what weapons have been withheld and why are you doing this? In the meantime, we talked to the Israelis. They're very upset about this. They thought this relationship, this does great damage to the relationship, and it should have been handled not in a public matter, but rather privately. I agree with that assessment, and I also, I can only imagine they didn't want us to know what was going on because they knew what the consequences would be when we've already approved these weapons in the four corners, and the Congress has appropriated the monies with the specific intent to deliver the defense articles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My favorite quote about Joe Biden is from President Obama's former secretary, Defense Secretary Robert Gates. I'm going to read it so I don't get it wrong because it's so good. But Secretary Gates said, "I think he has been wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades." And remember, this is a president that brags about when he was vice president, advising President Obama not to carry out the raid that killed Osama bin Laden. And this is now the president. And he comes into office, he approves Nord Stream 2, which allows the Russians to pump in gas to Europe. By the way, at the same time, almost the same time as he killed Keystone XL in our own country. You then have the disastrous withdrawal of Afghanistan, where he gave up the Bagram Air Base first. That's the first thing he did was give up our air superiority in the one base that we could maintain order. 13 American service members dead. He also, let's not forget, delisted the Houthis as a terrorist organization, and then embarrassingly had to relist the Houthis. He paused LNG exports, which of course benefit no one but Russia and Iran. And then you had October 7th. Since October 7th, there's been 100 attacks on U.S. service members just in the Middle East. And let's not forget this. You still have 5 Americans that are still held hostage in Gaza. Mr. Chairman, do you think if this president wasn't so bad on foreign policy and maybe adopted some of the foreign policy of the former administration, we wouldn't be having these problems, these disasters on the international stage?
Well, we didn't seem to have them in the previous administration. My theory is there's a bit of a fear factor, perhaps, or unpredictability. Having said that, your analysis is absolutely spot on, that the world's on fire now. And you have to ask yourself the question, why? Why is all this happening right now? You go back to Keystone, unleashing Putin's energy into Europe, making them dependent on Russia, not American LNG terminals in Europe, but Russia. Then Afghanistan, Ukraine, Taiwan, the Pacific, now the Ayatollah. Every day I worry about World War III and the consequences of this unholy alliance, Russia, China, and Iran, and North Korea. And if a strategic error is made at this point where we could be, in the future. I think this particular decision, why do it in the darkness of night? Why not be transparent with Congress as to what you were doing? Why not give notification? Why not brief the members of the committee that has primary jurisdiction over you? But that didn't happen. And I admire the ranking member greatly. But, if you can't finish Rafah, you can't finish Hamas. That's a bottom line. So when the president says, if you go into Rafah, I will not supply any weapons to you, I got to take him at face value. And what that means is that Israel cannot complete its mission. And if they can't complete the mission, That means Hamas is still going to be out there with 4 battalions, and you're never going to get to where we want to be on the diplomatic side with the Saudis, with UAE, with the Arab world and nations, for the first time recognizing the existence of the right of Israel to exist, the state of Israel. And that's where we want to be, but we can't get there until we let Israel do its job. I agree, it's got to be done in a humanitarian way, with a humanitarian zone. They're working on that right now. They're giving notices of evacuation. But to tie one hand behind their back and say, we're going to stop weapons shipments that Congress approved, I don't think that's the right strategy. And I think it sends the wrong message to not only our allies, but our adversaries, that we are weak.
Well, I think you can see that the wrong message is being sent. And case in point is Ukraine. If you look at Russia, remember, Russia took Crimea during President Obama's administration. Then you had 4 years of President Trump where the Russians did not make any more moves on Ukraine. Then enter Biden, and then the Russians move in to Ukraine, of course. It's very clear that our allies don't respect this president. They don't fear this president. And these dictatorships and these terrorist organizations feel like they have free reign because they have zero accountability, because they know the Biden administration will do very little to prevent their nefarious actions. So thanks for fighting this fight, Chairman McCaul, and I yield back.